After spending some time tinkering and trying out multiple builds on Hunter, I think I've finally landed on one that I think is the best for endgame. It will give you the following: incredible survivability, very fast uptime on Transcendence generation, multiple weapon options, with the ability to deal with all of the champions in the game, and being able to solo a GM. I'm not that good, so I've not succeeded at it yet, but I got pretty far on a couple of my attempts. Without exaggerating, this build is very easy to use and to pick up. Half the effects will be happening automatically, so you don't have to get into this crazy loop, and it means that you don't have to be up close and personal like a lot of the other builds such as Liar's Handshake, which have some crazy effects as well. So let's dive into the build and explain why it's so easy. For our aspects, we are using Starless Executioner for starters. This allows us to have constant invisibility due to the debuffs that we're going to be putting out with Stasis and our exotic pairing. The other aspect that we're going to be using is Threaded Spectre, and it allows for a decoy that can take away the focus from us, but also gives us additional threadling damage. This combination here is good because it, one, allows you to get out of tough situations when you need that little dodge to take away some of the extra fire, and being able to just go invisible on a whim is really good as well, because you could be very low health, you can get that invisibility, get yourself somewhere safe, and then if you also have your dodge, you can dodge when you come out of invisibility and get yourself safer as well. So very good all around for survivability. We're going to be pairing these with our two abilities, being the Withering Blade and Dustfield Grenade. Withering Blade is a slow option that allows us to hit multiple enemies and also shatter them as well, which is also going to be good going with the Dustfield Grenade, which is an overload option, the same as the Withering Blade, but it also allows us to lock down certain problem enemies. The thing I use this the most for is overload champions that are the ones that bounce around, or even barrier servitors, because if you can freeze them, it stops you from having to deal with killing them and killing the other enemies around them, then focusing on the champion to finish. These slowing options also play well into our fragments, which one of them is Facet of Ruin, which increases the shatter and ignition damage, plus increases the radius of those effects when equipped. So combining that with the Duskfield, you're able to freeze stuff, get more shatter damage, and also have improved ignitions if you decide to use Transcendent Grenade, which allows us to get some ignitions as well. Increased survivability, we're going to be going with Facet of Protection, because this gives us a 15% damage reduction when we are surrounded by 3 or more enemies, and then goes all the way up to 32% damage reduction when we are Transcendent, so extra damage reduction there. We're going to be then using Facet of Devotion and Facet of Solitude. These work in tandem. When you use Facet of Solitude, it adds Sever to targets after you precisionally hit them. So this is good for scout rifles, this is good for pulse rifles, and Sever is a darkness debuff, which leads right into Facet of Devotion. It increases the amount of light transcendent energy gained when we deal damage to targets that are inflicted with a darkness debuff. So that's slow, that's sever, that's suspend, that's unravel, that's shatter as well. These are all good things that we're going to be doing because we have our Dustfield Grenade and we also have our Withering Blade. The last of the fragments that we'll be using is Facet of Dawn. This is just so we get an extra 25% damage boost to all of our weapons when using it. We can throw out the Withering Blade and we're able to get a extra damage boost, which is going to be good. Just having extra damage is always good on these types of builds. This build is then taken to another level thanks to our exotic combo on our class item, which is Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of Gyrfalcon. Gyrfalcon is easy. This allows us to get volatile rounds when we come out of being invisible, so we're going to be pairing this with a void weapon. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, but this is very good because we're always going to be coming out of invisibility thanks to Starless Executioner, so we can have another option to deal with barriers if we're not running a barrier weapon. I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you're not, and then you also have the extra debuff that is from volatile rounds, which plays into the loop of Starless Executioner. So we're always going invisible and always having those volatile rounds active. Spirit of Galanor is very underrated purely because hits and final blows with this specific version of the perk will give us super energy back when it ends. So we're going to be pairing this with the Stasis Super, Silence, and Squall. You can also use this with Tether if you really want to. It's entirely up to you. But what it means is that once the super ends, we constantly get a massive chunk of our super back. It doesn't do it instantaneously, but it comes back very, very quickly. And before you know it, when you're in the loop of the build, you will have your super back easily, and you can just repeat it again. I usually save this for when I'm coming up against a big wave of ads, or specifically an annoying champion. But having both invisibility and then getting volatile rounds after it, and having Galanor that's just going on in the background after you've thrown out your super, is two nice effects to have that you don't have to worry necessarily about activating them all the time. The weapon options that you choose with this build will change depending on the activity, but some of the ones I recommend the most is number 1 being Graviton Lance. Absolutely destroys champions when you have volatile rounds active. It also pierces their shields as well because of anti-barrier pulse, but also just the AoE effect of Graviton Lance activating is very good. And once again, it's an ability that activates and you don't have to do anything. You just literally have to get a precision kill and then it does the work for you. A lot of people also use Buried Bloodline, which gives us an insane extra effect of getting Weaken and also Devour, which increases our survivability in the endgame even more. And it's unstoppable sidearm this season. If you don't have this, you're going to have to go and farm out Warlord's Ruin. I love this exotic. It's probably one of my favorite new exotics that they've added to the game, and it can get volatile rounds as well. So it has that extra add clear effect and can also be used as a debuffing weapon for Stylish Executioner. Of course, other void weapons are optional. I've used Word of Crota and Elsie's Rifle with the Repulsor Brace perk because you're always going to have volatile rounds, which means that you get Overshield, which gives you even more damage reduction. So I use this in the Lost Sector because hand cannons are overload this season. Word of Crota is fantastic for this. There's also Elsie's Rifle, which we just have that can get this on. And there's also the previous season's ritual weapon, Velez X, which also has Golden Tricorn and Repulsor Brace on it. And I love using either Hammerhead or Commemoration or any other void weapon if you really wanted to. You can use a rocket if you want with volatile rounds to just give you that extra radiant. So any void rockets are pretty good as well. For the mod setup on this build, this is going to be going into keeping us with a extra damage buff the entire time, but not necessarily focusing on any one ability. Probably more so our grenade and melee, but maybe our grenade a little bit more. So in our main head slot, we're going to be using a Void Siphon because we're using Void. If you are running a Void Super, so you decide to run Tether, you can run Harmonic Siphon instead. And if you decide to run a Stasis weapon for some reason, then you can use that here. But I use a heavy ammo finder, and then if I had better stats, I would probably swap this around and put another ammo finder in here. On our arms, we have Bolstering Detonation, which is it grants us class ability energy when we cause damage with our grenade. Likewise, when we caused damage with our powered melee, it reduces our grenade cooldown. And then the same when we cause damage with our grenade, we get our melee back quicker. These are all very, very good and well-rounded. You could probably swap one of these out maybe and go with like Focusing Strike if you really wanted to, but it's up to you. We have resistances on our chest piece just for extra damage reduction. You can swap these out, potentially one and go down to like a Harmonic Siphon and get yourself even Concussive Dampener. It's entirely up to you. Or even melee resistance, because sometimes you might be a little bit too close and you might need it. On our boots, this is where we are going to be using one Void Weapon Surge. You could go with two here if you wanted to, if I had better stat setups. But I've got one Recuperation and one in Innovation, purely because it gives us our grenade back quicker, but also it gives us that little bit extra health regen if sometimes you feel like you're in a bad situation and you need to get yourself a little bit of health, which if your teammates are generating health for you as well, or orbs I should say, then you're going to get this back quite easily. On our Bond, this is a really underrated mod that a lot of people don't use. When you use a finisher, you are able to get yourself a powerful overshield. This is good for when you're going in to kill champions, when you're going in to kill high priority targets, or just one of those ads that's kind of out of the way and you have like no ammo left. This is fantastic. Combined with powerful attraction, this will allow you to collect orb of power when you use your class ability, and also time dilation to give you an extension on our surges. For the artifact, we are going to be using our main setup as we usually do. Shield Crush is going to be great because while we are Radiant, we're going to be able to get our grenade back. We're not going to be amplified here, which doesn't mean we'll get it, but sometimes if we do get an overshield, our melee will come back quicker. Also expanding Abyss, because void sources deal increased damage to weakened targets. If you do decide to go with the Buried Bloodline, this is fantastic for that. Likewise, when we get a weaken with this as well, you'll also be able to get an overshield thanks to void hegemony. Radiant Orbs is also good. We won't be activating Galvanic Armor here because we're not really using Arc, so you could swap this out and go with Counter Energy for when you're in more endgame content. So you can have a member of your fire team or you stun a champion, get energy back there. You also have Elemental Siphon, which if you're using a weapon that matches your super, you're able to get an elemental pickup. In this case, if we decide to swap out a void weapon and go with like a kinetic weapon, we're going to be able to get extra elemental pickups. And also a strong recommendation for Threaded Blast if you decide to run a strand weapon for that extra explosion of tangle damage. So you've seen the mods, you've seen how the build plays, and why do I think this is one of the better ones that I've ever used? The reason being is a lot of hunter builds require you to be quite aggressive, to be up close and personal, to get advantage of those combination blows, and to chain being invisible, using that 1-2 punch effect, and using grapple grenades to get in and do a whole bunch of damage. And not a lot of people play that way. They like to be a little bit more passive, and you can do that with this build because a lot of the effects are just going on in the background. The volatile rounds is always going to be up. You're always going to get your grenade back because of the mods that we have set up, and you're also going to be able to get your super back very, very quickly. And in a team of 3, you can play the role of being quite passive and you can get your super out very quickly, which is good. And then even better, when you get Transcendence, you're able to deal with champions even easier. You're able to lock stuff down. So overall, it just comes together as a very nice, strong, well-rounded build, which is what I like to see and what I like to showcase on the channel. What do you think? Is there a better build out there? Is there another exotic combo that I haven't tried? I have one other one that I want to check out and showcase on the channel to see how it compares. But overall, I love this build. And if you want to check out the link in the description to Mobalytics and also to Dim, then feel free to do so. If you are new here, leave a like on it, subscribe as always. And this has been Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.